Over the last couple of months, we've been loosely going through a series looking at our DNA, who we are as a church, who we are as a people, in a sense, our way of being. And back in the start of the year, January, I talked about what it was for us to be a people who love God. And then in February, Andy talked about what it is to be a community who love people well. And a couple of weeks ago, Ali spoke brilliantly about worship and the priority of worship for us. And so today I want to look at another aspect of who we are as a church and who we're going to continue to be, because for many of us, this is why we joined this church. This is why we are here. And that is that we are a people of the Spirit. And we're going to continue to be a church who is committed to making space for the Holy Spirit to move among us, because as we allow God to move by his Spirit, as we just read in that passage in Acts, he will do more than we could ask or imagine. And he will draw people to himself and to this place. And I long that we make more space for the Spirit. I long that we pursue Jesus more. And as we pursue his presence, as we pursue the Spirit, that he would transform us, he would revive us, he would renew us and shake us up in new ways and in ways that we least expect. And because when the Holy Spirit comes, the outworking of that is we are changed. The outworking of that is fruit. And just as we read in that passage, when the Holy Spirit comes, there is freedom. There is salvation, and people come to know Jesus. And I don't know about you, but I'm longing to see that in this place. I'm longing that people meet Jesus, find Jesus, fall in love with Jesus, and their lives are changed. Who is with me? Come on, who is with me? I'm longing for it. And so we're going to look and we're going to talk about the Holy Spirit this morning. But first, I've got another driving story. I know you love a driving story. But back in 2017, we were driving to Italy. And we were on the French motorway. We were on the wrong side of the road, but the right side of the road, if you see where I'm going with that. And I was in the outside lane, going a touch over 70. And behind me were my mum and dad in their car, and behind them was my brother and his wife and kids in a car. And we were steaming along in the outside lane when all of a sudden, in front of me, a truck on the other side of the motorway hit the central concrete reservation, smashed through it, and ended up in my lane in front of me, with concrete flying through the air. And I thought, this is it. This is the end. And so I just swerved. I thought, I don't want to hit that, and I'd rather hit whatever's that side. So I just swerved. Miraculously, nothing was there. And we kind of flew through this debris of concrete that was flying. Again, amazingly, nothing hit us. And we ended up in the central, off on the hard shoulder of the motorway. There is a picture that you can see. Now, I was up the road coming that way, and that thing ended up in my lane right in front of me. Now, as you possibly could imagine, I was slightly shaken up. As we got out of the car, we sort of just stood back and just look at, my word, that just happened, and we are still alive. And I was shaken. And we got back in the car, and I drove very, 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 very slowly. And I gripped the steering wheel like I have never gripped the steering wheel before. And we proceeded very, very slowly to the next service station, where I drank quite a few espressos to calm my nerves. And we were shaken, really shaken. And we had to head off again, so we had lunch. And as we left, I became a very, very cautious driver for about an hour. where I was driving at about 30 on the motorway, and I thought, we've still got 1,000 miles ahead of us. If I drive at 30 for the next 1,000 miles, we will miss the holiday. So I had to just get back, get going, and start steaming forward again. And in a sense, that whole thing of not feeling safe, I had to just to lean in and think, well, actually, we're never going to get to our destination if I don't just get going again. And I wonder whether for us as a church and as individuals, when it comes to pursuing the Holy Spirit, when it comes to pursuing his power and his presence both in our lives and in our gatherings together as a church, whether we have become hesitant or even fearful because of the journey we've been on. And maybe for some of us, either the circumstances that have taken place over the last 12 months here in this place, or maybe there's other circumstances that have happened in your life, and it's been a little bit like a truck smashing through the central reservation and ending up in the outside lane of your life. And as a result, we have held back. We've lost our confidence in allowing God to be God. Maybe we've lost our confidence of just being able to give the Holy Spirit freedom to do whatever he wants. And pursuing the Spirit has always been core to who we are as a people, to who we are as a church. But it's been like we've been back on the road, but we've just been proceeding with extreme caution. And I know this past year has been tough. And again, I want to acknowledge that. And I want to acknowledge that for some, this is still painful. What has taken place is still painful. And I don't want anyone to think we have swept that under the carpet. We know that this is still painful. But I also wonder whether for some of us, there is a longing that we just begin to look up and pursue Jesus again, that we begin to make space for him to move in and amongst us. And I long that we begin to do that. And we have seen glimpses of new hope and new life beginning to move in this place. And I know that the Lord has good stuff for this place in the coming days and weeks and months ahead. But I really believe that as we begin to give space and we allow freedom for the Spirit to move, that he will continue the journey of healing, but he will also surprise us. And where we've stepped back, maybe it's time for us just to lean in again, lean in to all that he has for us, lean in and pursue him and pursue his presence in a new way. And I'm also aware that there are a number of us that have joined the church over the past few months. And you might be thinking, oh, well, this isn't for me because I wasn't around when this happened. But I just want to say to you as well, this is for you. This is for all of us. And just as Peter stood up in front of the crowd, he said this, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my Spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. I will show wonders in the heavens above, and everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And so today, I long for us as a church to grasp a new freedom, a new confidence to get back on the road and to confidently pursue Jesus, to confidently pursue his presence with anticipation and great expectation. And so this morning, I just want to look at 3 quick lessons from Acts. And that is what happens when the Holy Spirit what happens when the Holy Spirit's power and presence falls on a people, and more importantly, what happens when the Holy Spirit falls on us, falls on you, falls on me, and changes and transforms us. And Lillian just read from Acts 1 a moment ago. While he, Jesus, was eating, he gave them this command: do not leave Jerusalem, but wait for the gift my Father promised, which you have heard me speak about. For John baptized with water, but in a few days you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit. So the first lesson is this: as we pursue his presence, the first thing we learn when it comes to pursuing the Spirit is we wait. There is a place for waiting. And there have been times in my life when I've had to wait. And my wedding day was one of those. And I was at the front of the church. Claire was nowhere to be seen. And the M25 had got blocked up, and I discovered that they stopped the wedding until lots more people had arrived. And so they kept Claire outside. And but I was there at the front in great expectation, anticipation, excitement, in waiting for Claire to arrive. I knew that in a few moments, this amazing person was going to walk down the aisle and get me. Here is a little picture of me and Claire many years ago. Look how young we look. Beautiful. But I had to wait. Although I think actually the whole congregation thought there was something wrong with me, because I blubbed then the entire time she walked down the aisle. They thought, what's wrong with the man? He's getting her and he's crying. But another time I had to wait was when I worked at Heathrow. I waited for the Queen for the opening of Terminal 2. And I had to wait even longer than I had to wait for Claire. And it was hours that we waited for her because of security. But she finally arrived. And I can say that I have seen the Queen in real life. There she is. There, yeah. And I have to say, I don't think the wait was worth it. I mean, it was lovely to see her. It was lovely to see her, but my legs were, sorry, Jeannie, it was definitely worth the wait. Jeannie tells me it was worth the wait. I waited for the Queen. And then more recently, we were in Dubai visiting my brother who lives out there. And for some crazy reason, my nieces and my kid, and well, it's only Rosie because the others weren't there, convinced me to go on a slingshot, which is a reverse bungee jump. I don't know why I said I'd do it, but there was this moment of waiting before this thing went. I'm going to show you the little video. Here we go. I scream like a baby. I apologize now.
Get ready to touch the stars.
What are we doing?
Get ready to touch the stars.
This was awful.
5,
Oh my God.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Go!
Thank you. Thank you. When I got down, Claire was like, I actually thought you were going to have a heart attack. She was like worried that... I actually said to my niece when we got in, I said, should we both pretend to be unconscious when we go up? And she was like, no, don't do that. Anyway, but that wait before we went, and it was a lot longer than that, felt forever. But there was this anticipation, there was this excitement before we went. And I can tell, you know, you could see a lot of fear on my face as well. But the point is this, there is sometimes a place for waiting in our lives. And Jesus tells the disciples to wait in Jerusalem and to wait with expectancy because someone is coming. Someone powerful is coming. And he says wait because he knows that what he's called them to do, they cannot do on their own. They need someone to come and help them. They need someone who would give them power in order to work out what he had called them to do in their lives. And it's the same for us. We need the power and presence of Jesus in our lives and in our church in order to live out what he has called us to. And so when we gather together on Sundays, when we gather together in our connect groups, when we get into our own personal time with Jesus, let's get into the practice of waiting more. Because so often we rush. And sometimes we just need to slow down and wait. And we're going to do that in a little while. And Jesus says to the disciples in verse 8, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. But they had to wait. And there is something significant about us corporately gathering together and waiting. We do this together. And in verse 14 of chapter 1, it says this, they all joined together constantly in prayer. And I love that. They came together, they waited together, they prayed together, and the Spirit moved. So the first thing is this, we need to wait. The second thing we can learn from this is when the Holy Spirit comes, his power is made perfect in weakness. And for us as a church and as a community of people, we need his presence. I need his presence. I don't know about you, but I'm just longing for his presence. And I'm longing for his power more than ever, particularly if we're going to live out what God has called us to as a church and as individuals. And without his presence, it's kind of like a car with no fuel in the tank. We won't be going anywhere. And the early church in Acts, they were like an empty car, empty, lifeless, until Pentecost came, until the Spirit filled them. And it was in that moment that they were filled and they went. It was the Spirit which empowered them and sent them. Verse 12, it says this, amazed and perplexed, they asked one another, what does this mean? And you get this sense of just disbelief, bewilderment, confusion. The crowd can't believe what's going on in this moment. So they shout out, what does this mean? What does this mean? And this is a significant moment because it's in this moment that there is a realization of what is happening to these people is not possible in their own strength or their own ability. What is happening is a result of their waiting. The power of the Holy Spirit is available to us now in our weakness and in our waiting. And all we need to do is come with a posture of readiness to receive. But for some of us, maybe we struggle to believe that this is for us. Maybe there are things that have gone on, circumstances in our lives which have allowed doubt and fear to take root. And therefore, it's almost like we've put up a wall and we're blocking God being able to move and impact our lives. And here in Acts, there were these people with exactly the same doubts. Verse 13, some, however, made fun of them and said, they've had too much wine. This crowd that were looking at this people thought they were drunk. But Peter stands up, verse 14, fellow Jews and all of you who live in Jerusalem, let me explain to you this. Listen carefully to what I say. These people are not drunk. And you can understand why in this crowd, they're questioning what is going on. They're watching this whole bunch of people who have suddenly found freedom and they're confused. And what Peter is saying here is these people are free. These people have found freedom. These people have stopped worrying about their circumstances. They've stopped focusing on the things that have held them back. They've stopped worrying about other people's opinions of them. And they've intentionally opened their hearts to be filled. And as they have made that step, something changed. They've been transformed by the power of the Spirit. And maybe for some of us today, we're here thinking, well, this isn't for me either. I'm excluded from this. And it might be for a variety of reasons. It might be out of a place of fear. It might be that you've believed that your failings and shortcomings have somehow discounted you from receiving the Spirit. Maybe there's a doubt that God could do this again here in this place. Or maybe you've just never experienced it before. And so it's totally outside of your comprehension. But this is for everyone. It's for me. It's for you. And we only have to look at the life of Peter to know that this is for each of us too. On that day, Peter was changed. He was transformed. And if you've read the Gospels, you'll know that Peter messed up numerous times. 50 days before Pentecost, Jesus is on the way to the cross, and 3 people come up to Peter and said, "Are you with him?" Are you with Jesus? And each time Peter says, no, I'm not. I'm not with him. And even Jesus predicts to Peter and tells him, you're going to deny me. And Peter says, no, I won't. And then sure enough, 3 times the very next day, he denies Jesus. Once to a little girl by a fire, and then to 2 servants. And then there was the time where Jesus calls Peter out of the boat to walk on the water. And again, you'd think this is the moment that he will put his entire trust in Jesus, but he doesn't. He starts to doubt again, and he starts to sink. And we're still reading about it. 2,000 years on, Peter's sinking in the water. And then there's the time when Jesus tells the disciples that he's the Messiah. And Peter rebukes him and says, no, you're not. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. So you kind of get this picture that Peter messes up. He's just like us. He's got doubts, fears, he lies, he struggles to trust, he has good days, he has bad days. But despite all of his failings, despite all of his shortcomings, the Holy Spirit meets with him. And in verse 14, we see a transformation take place in Peter's life. Peter stood up with the 11, raised his voice and addressed the crowd. And I love that little phrase because it just speaks the change. Peter stood up. The one who didn't take a stand for Jesus when he was on the way to the cross is now standing not in front of 3 people, but in front of a crowd of 3,000 people proclaiming the good news of Jesus. What changed? What made the difference in Peter? The difference was the Spirit filled him. Jesus made the difference. And that's what happens to us when we allow the Spirit to fill us. He transforms us and he changes us. The Spirit wants to give us power beyond what we think we can do on our own. What he calls us to, what he calls you to, he equips you for, he equips us for. And Peter is one of those characters in the Bible that gives me so much hope and assurance for me, for you, and for us as a church. Because the reality is we all have our struggles. We all have our struggles. And I can tell you, I have countless struggles where little things just come into my head to try and just niggle away and say, you can't do that. And the lies and stuff, those little voices, we all have them that try and knock your confidence and knock you off course. But what I do know is this: it's the Spirit which strengthens me in my weakness. It's the Spirit which strengthens you in your weakness. And for many of us, and for this church, this has been a year of shaking. And it's been difficult. And when life gets shaken up, the question is, what gets shaken out? And is it that we run away? Is it anger bubbles up? Is it rage? Is it gossip? Is it reverting to the things and the addictions that maybe have held us? What comes out is what we've allowed to go in. And so for some of us, maybe this is a moment to step back and maybe to ask the Spirit to highlight those things in our lives which we know need to change. Maybe the things that have blocked our relationship and our freedom. Maybe for some of us, it's time just to stop striving, to start resting, to start waiting, to start receiving, either for the first time or we just need to receive again. Maybe today is the day to step out of whatever's been holding you back and surrender to Jesus again and just say, here I am. 2 Corinthians verse 12 says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And sometimes that's hard to accept, that we're weak. Because this passage doesn't say my power is made perfect in my strength or my talents or what I can do. It doesn't say my power is made perfect in the things that I try to hide away from God. It doesn't say my power is made perfect in what I do to impress others or how much money we have. It says, my power is made perfect in weakness. His power is made perfect in vulnerability. His power is made perfect in honesty. And maybe today is the day that we just need to stretch out our hands again and say, Jesus, I need you. Because when we do, everything changes. And that's what happened to Peter that day. He said yes. He said yes to receiving the Spirit. He said yes to God, and he stepped out and he took a risk. He was vulnerable, and in that moment, he was probably the last person that the other 11 thought was going to stand up and address the crowd. But he shows us what a life transformed by the Spirit looks like. And all we need to do is open ourselves up to the transforming power of his presence as well. And as we do, he moves towards us, he steps in, and he transforms us. And that's exactly what happened. Verse 41, those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. 3,000 were added. Revival came. Revival came. And I'm longing that God would move in this place in a new way again. That not because we're longing for revival, but because we're longing that he would transform and renew and change our hearts again. And that out of the ashes, beauty and new life would spring up again. That there would be a renewed hunger in each of our hearts for just more of Jesus. And what's amazing about this story in Acts is that when they were filled, the revival didn't begin with 3,000 people turning up. The revival began when those people who were already there were filled and transformed. Revival wasn't about people turning up. It was about the people who were already there saying, I need you, I want you, fill me, change me, transform me. I'm longing for more of you. And that was the moment when everything changed. And I really believe that this is a message for us as a church community today. We are called to be a people who pursue his presence, a people who pursue the Spirit. Revival, renewal, refreshings, outpourings, whatever you want to call it, it really doesn't matter. What matters is it begins with you and me, who are already here, who are already in this place, opening up their hearts and saying, here I am. God, I'm ready. Jesus, transform me, change my heart. And if we want to see God move, it starts with you and me opening our hearts afresh to Jesus and just saying, have your way in me. And that's the heart of what happened on that day. It wasn't about Peter. It wasn't about 3,000 people turning up or the crowd that there. It was about the Holy Spirit and what he can do in a life, what he can do in your life when you open yourself up to him. Can God add to our number? Absolutely, he can. But what's his plan to do it? It's me and it's you. And what's more amazing about this story is 3,000 weren't just added that day, but they were completely transformed. Why? Because of what happened in verses 1 to 7. The Holy Spirit came. And the final lesson is this: the Spirit is always accessible and available to us. He is always available, but we have to make space. Verse 17, Peter said this, in the last days, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people, and everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. In other words, if you call on him, he will be there. If you call on him from your place of weakness or brokenness or doubt or fear, he will be there. And maybe you're here today and you're thinking, well, I don't feel broken. I don't feel weak at the moment, but I'm just longing for more of Jesus. He's accessible to you. Maybe for some of us, we've just been longing and praying for years that his kingdom would come, his will would be done, that God would renew us and revive us, that our town and our communities would be transformed by Jesus. His promise to us is if you call on him, he will move towards you.